I'm waiting for it to start up. Oh, Rumble did not connect. I really want to get Rumble connected. I mean, I'm really new to this, but if I can make the Rumble stream work, I'd like to, because it's kind of popular right now, and in case it becomes more popular, it's a good idea to get like bumping up onto there. So we're gonna try. I think it's a different procedure. I think it's like the I think you gotta go through, like, let me see, a copy and paste. But yeah, if anyone filing in during the replay, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Or subscribing in general if you're not already subscribed. Just currently, wow, they got a lot of categories on freaking Rumble. It's like they got subcategories. Okay. And then we gotta go and add a thumbnail image, I guess. I'm kind of not trying to do that right now, but I really need to get me like a default setting for something like that. There we go. Okay, good. So hopefully no one's in the chat yet, because I can't read the chat yet. And I'm gonna set up for that any second now, but if anybody's talking in the chat, I cannot see you until I click this button. So we're gonna do, when do you want to go live? Right now. I'm just telling Rumble to fire it up. And I clicked on the button. Oh, and it wants me to put a video placeholder. Jeez, I had to do this bullshit yesterday. That was stupid. Alright, well, that's fine. I think I created a video placeholder yesterday. I don't remember what it was called. I hope I can find it. What a pain in the butt. I should definitely get that YouTube chat up. I'm gonna guess that video placeholder is only temporary. I might just put a video of my turtle up until like I get there. I'm gonna just put, damn it, I'm gonna kick these people in the nuts. I don't want to put a 300 megabyte video up. Okay, 1 minute and 10 seconds, it's going. I just put a random video placeholder up because Rumble wouldn't let me just start the stream without having one. Let the record state that I was not looking to do that, but they made me. So now let's get the YouTube chat up and running, because I cannot see it right now. So I'm going to go to my YouTube studio. Content, because everything is content today. And, there it is. Okay, good. I found it. Oh my god, nobody can participate in the chat. This is why I hate using Restream and all this crap. I hate using these other streaming services, because they'll let you start your stream up without people seeing what you have in the, you know, without people being able to see or participate in your chat. Okay, good. So I'm just trying to get it to fire up on Rumble. Like I said, I just might as well. It's the popular place to be right now. So might as well attempt to have a presence there. Okay, so let's see. Personal use, Rumble only. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. I agree. What a pain in my ass. This is why people don't use the new tech. Now, I might have too many Chrome tabs open. I'm gonna just save that up front right now. Because right now, My Chrome is not liking me at all. Pain in the butt. Here I'm starting up a stream. Well, I guess we're just gonna have to not stream this to YouTube. To Rumble. Yeah. Okay. So I guess Rumble loses the stream today. I guess I can upload a video. So I was in the middle of sanding this thing here. Let's get the chat window. Oh yeah, no chat window. I guess I can bring it up on my phone. Yeah, I don't like not interacting with the chat at all if there's people. Yeah, this is why I don't use these streaming services half the time. Alright, let's see here. We're gonna fire it up. Oh, now Rumble wants to load up this stupid ass page? Fucking assholes. So I go to Rumble and I'm like, basically they're saying you got to put a placeholder video here. So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll put a placeholder video there. Also, I'm just opening up the tabs I just closed a minute ago, and none of them are the ones I care about. So anyway, let's get that back here. Oh, good, I closed a bunch of junk I don't need. But yeah, so I had the YouTube thing here. Here we go. We got one viewer was watching. I'm going to put the pop-out chat. And right when I open up pop-out chat, that's when my browser kind of locked up on me. So what I was trying to do was get this working on Rumble, and then Rumble teased me. Rumble said it was uploading the video, that it's forcing me to upload. And then it errors out. It freezes up my browser. So I'm going to give Rumble one more chance. 88%, 89%, 90%, 92%. It says 1 minute, but it looks like it's going to be done in 10 seconds. 99, 100%. Okay. Then it's asking me, if I want to upload. Oh, I see what Rumble did to me, those ass wipes. There we go. I got to re-input that. There we go. Okay, that was an interesting glitch in the UI that I just discovered. So now it's going to start the Rumble stream. And then we can focus on the topic at hand. And if it doesn't work, I'm just going to go and, do it anyway. Can't wait like 10 minutes for the submit button to finish glowing, right? But in the meantime, I gotta refine some edges here. This is the ship from Legend of the Galactic Heroes. This is the Hyperion. Oh good, now Rumble is ready. Okay, we're gonna click on the button here to go live on Rumble. Connecting. Sending data. Is it sending Lieutenant Commander data? All right, it cannot connect, probably because I gotta update the thing. Okay, so let's double check my settings, which I see you got different stream settings after each stream, I guess. All right, well, I'm willing to edit those settings, no big deal. So we're gonna put a new URL, and a new stream key. Save it. Okay, that's not too hard either, you know, like I just needed to know if that's what I needed to do. So now it's going to connect to Rumble in 5, 4, 3, sending data, not Lieutenant Commander data, because that would be funny if we're sending the guy named data, right? And now not only is it sending data, we are now streaming. And so after 7 minutes on YouTube, we are ready to stream on Rumble. So what I was doing before I started, anyway, okay, we're ready to begin now. So anyway, for anyone tuning in during the replay, please consider subscribing and liking if you're coming in on either network, be it Rumble or YouTube. But yeah, before I started this today, I was in the middle of, basically finishing up this ship from Legend of the Galactic Heroes. This is the flagship Hyperion, Yang Wen Li's flagship. It's a pretty cool ship. It's going to get a light blue color scheme, I think. It's got to match what you see in the TV show. We have some brass rods coming in the mail tomorrow, I hope. And so basically I just got to heat them up and stab them into the places where there are supposed to be antennas. Otherwise, it's basically ready to go. Like, this print came out with surprisingly decent detail for the most part. It doesn't even necessarily need a sanding, but I wanted to get some wrinkles out of it and basically just make it so that the primer sticks to it better. Now, the printer I have, you could modify to do different colors filament, in one print. But there are challenges associated with everything in 3D printing. It's not like a normal inkjet printer where you can just kind of just print, right? You get the same piece of paper out of it. It always comes out looking with this, has the same quality every time you use, your paper. And a toner cartridge from a good old black and white laserjet printer will last you for years on end when used in a home environment. Whereas a 3D printer requires more maintenance than a low-cost inkjet printer. It's just going to always require some kind of maintenance. For example, let's talk about the two types. You got FDM printers, which print in successive layers, I'm going to get a picture up here. An FDM printer is basically pushing melted plastic through a nozzle. Like we see here, we have a heated nozzle, heated to 200 degrees Celsius. And it's pushing a string or a tube of filament. It looks like the weed whacker filament that you use on a weed whacker, but it's pushing that material through a heated nozzle. And it's basically behaving like melted plastic. And it's doing, shapes one layer at a time. This operates like an old school drafting plotter. A drafting plotter was like a printer where there was like a pencil, so the nozzle would be replaced by a pencil, and same thing on a modern printer. The print head was basically a pencil moving side to side on the x-axis, and in order to draw a circle, the paper would move forwards or backwards while the nozzle was moving in one direction or the other, and that's what we get here. So for our very first layer, our printer bed is basically the paper in an old school plotter. And you can see it's moving forwards and back on the y-axis. And if we zoom in over here, we see the nozzle, which of course, instead of it being a crayon or a pencil, it's a nozzle with melted material coming out the end of a tiny hole. But what's going on here is the bed is moving away from the nozzle. Then the bed is moving towards the nozzle as it continues moving right. And that's why the nozzle looks like it's going backwards. That's basically how an old school plotter works. But with 3D printing, it's doing, the whole layer, like that. So even now, it's like the nozzle is only moving left or right while the bed is moving towards or away from it to create these diagonal lines. And then it does it in successive layers, but all the while each layer is just a one-dimensional drawing for the most part. There's sometimes additional data like how thick to make the layer or flow rate of material, but overall it's like a plotter, which is probably why when I tuned into a crime scene drama in the early 2000s, they refer to their 3D printer as a Z plotter, because it's like a plotter with a Z-axis. Now, if this is a FDM printer, we're melting plastic-like material. This is called PLA. PLA is non-toxic, generally speaking. And you get pretty much these telltale signs that it's in a 3D printer. This one's not too bad overall in terms of quality, but you can still see some like little horizontal lines. Sometimes they'll be more apparent on a failed print. This one also has a weird internal wall structure, but that's another story. That was actually, this one was designed inherently hollow, and for some reason the person who designed it created like little air gaps between the sections. I'm not sure why they did that, but it seems not to have hurt the model's shape in general. So, you know, you can see here, I do have this weird wavy pattern for some reason, but overall, I mostly have like pretty clean and almost flat looking straight lines. You know, it's going to be challenged by these bits that stick out here and there, but you could sand them a little bit. You know, you could do a little cleaning, and that's sort of what I did on the Hyperion right here. You know, we're not necessarily looking for it to be perfect. Maybe like a clean up this area over here if I think it's not going to, you know, prime nicely. But even in a lot of parts, you can just wipe them down to clean them up a little bit. But I did do like a lot of sanding and thorough cleanup on here, just to kind of like make it a little more presentable, so that when I do apply a coat of primer on here, it'll do a better job of covering up issues. Like over here, there's like a pair of antennae, and I'm going to replace these nubs with a copper or brass rod. I'm going to shove a brass rod, I'm going to heat it up and stab it into the plastic. Same thing here. This part I did finish up a little bit, but I'm not going to go overkill on it. It looked a lot more ragged before I got to it. Like, sure, maybe I can like go at it with like a little X-Acto blade down the middle here. No, but overall, I'm going to leave that alone. Like, I don't want to overdo it, because this whole area, especially this area here, I had to put a lot into it, and it, you know, at risk of almost making it worse. So I do like a little cleanup here with the sandpaper maybe, or the blade. But this area here, I'm kind of just resigning to probably leaving it alone, because I don't think there's much I could do to that part to make it look any better. If anything, I'll put putty in there. Oh yeah, modeling putty. So, you know, you got to be creative. You know, model makers, people who are skilled at making action figures, they already have other skill sets outside of, you know, the part here where we're, you know, doing now. You know, they have skills in creating resin molds without a resin machine. And let's talk about resin. So they have another type of 3D printer. Sometimes they are referred to as a DLP printer, I believe. I think they're using like a DLP projector with UV light or UV lasers in order to, you know, accomplish what they do. Those are all great and everything, but they create fumes, right? You know, you're going to get fumes out of a machine that uses resin, just like making fiberglass. And so usually a lot of people won't do anything about it, but really you should have like it in a tent. Sort of like right now my printer is in a tent, even though I'm using non-toxic material. If I decided I wanted to print ABS plastic, in fact PLA melts at a low temperature. This black plastic up here is ABS, and although this one was not 3D printed in the you know, image here, it's still, you know, if you use the ABS plastic filament, you got to run at a higher temperature. It creates toxic fumes, so you need to have like a dryer vent basically hooked up to your tent so that you can bring the exhaust out the window. So you literally have a fan pushing it through a tube and out a window. And beyond that, if there are any drafts, the ABS filament is more likely to warp. So this tent helps out. In this tent, I would have to crank up the temperatures on the bed and the nozzle, and then I'd probably still have to have like some other heat source in there to warm up the inside of the tent even further, but a draft will warp it. But even if you're using normal material like PLA, you got to level the four corners of that bed. So we see over here, we got, you know, four corners. They got to be leveled. One corner is too high or too low, you're going to run into problems. You know, and the example of that is right here. We got an Octoprint, this mesh. We have a little sensor probe that can map the corners of the bed in order to help us determine if it's level or not level, you know, if it needs any leveling. And so to really make use of that, oh, this is already dry. So basically my point is if the leveling is off, you're gonna have a bad time. Now, how do you level the bed? Well, like I said earlier, you loosen or tighten the set screws under the four corners, and you'll be able to, you'll be able to level the, basically make it so that the nozzle is always the same distance. You want the nozzle to be the same distance away from the four corners of the printer bed. It's probably like a messy putty job. You don't want it too close because it'll scratch the bed and not print material out. If it's too far, the material will not adhere to the printer bed. That's why my bed is the way it is. That's why I have like what looks like a glazing or coating of glass on it. That's actually a glue basically that you spread on it like butter. And that's because some materials are more stubborn about adhesion than others. So, one, printing towards the center of the bed is always easier in my experience. But if you have to print near the corners, or even if you're using material that is super temperamental in the center of the bed, you're going to still have to like have good leveling. And so manual leveling is doable, but having it automatically, automatic leveling sensor to help is good. Now, it's not actually leveling the bed automatically. All it's doing is telling the Z-axis nozzle to compensate, saying move up or down a little bit. That's all it's doing. It's not actually, fixing the leveling. I wish they had automatic leveling in the actual, true sense of the word, but what they offer is a means of compensating for errors. So you still got to manually level the bed. It doesn't magically level itself, is, the big deal there. Now, that's an FDM printer. Assuming you're using non-toxic filament, the alternative is a resin printer or a DLP printer, or, the UV curing process. Basically, you have this liquid goo that hardens one layer at a time through the use of a UV light or UV laser. And basically, they tend to build smaller parts, so you get larger parts using the printer I have. I have a Creality Ender 3 version 2. An FDM printer will allow you to do smaller parts. Let me say, I'm sorry. An FDM printer will allow you to do larger parts, like double the size sometimes for the same price. But the resin printer tends to be better on detail, and so you might find it easier to cut your parts into smaller pieces and then glue them together afterwards. But the problem is the resin printers always produce fumes. Some people are more tolerant of them, but you're not doing yourself any favors, exposing yourself to toxic fumes. Some of the resin printers will claim to come with a filter or like an enclosure with a filter. You gotta watch those because sometimes they're just marketed to allow people to fool themselves into thinking it's working. You gotta be on top of those filter changes. You can't like mess around. It's not like having pet turtles. Them you can sort of like finagle it. You could, a turtle doesn't get mad at you if you don't change their filter. Okay, that's a joke, but in all seriousness though, it does have more serious consequences in general when it comes to that. So the way this material works here, this putty, is we're gonna let it dry and then we're gonna sand it down a little bit, and we should be in pretty good shape. If anything, I should make sure I get some of the excess, because before I got a bunch of the material stuck inside little sockets like these, gun ports, and I didn't get it out. So I'm gonna just clean that up a little bit. Beyond that, not gonna be too generous with the putty. I've already sanded the back of it. So at this point, I'm pretty close to ready to priming it. Like I sanded most of the bottom here. Like I saw some stringing here I want to remove. Maybe I would re-add some putty to the side, because sanding down the putty once it's been applied isn't that big of a deal. One thing I'm noticing is this putty here definitely should be what do you call it? You shouldn't leave the cap open like I'm doing right now, because it seems to dry or harden pretty quickly. Or at least it seems to gunk up pretty quickly. So I'm gonna have to like try to close the cap on the bottle. Oh gosh, fucking high. This putty also makes some smells or fumes. It's very interesting. It's like shaving. You get better, movement on one axis, and then the only other thing I would want to do differently is there we go. I'm just cleaning off my blade a little bit to get some of the excess off. I want to make sure that I don't have too much in these intake grooves here so that when I go to sand it, it's a little easier to sand. So I'm just going to kind of prep that area right now. Something like that. Ah! Touched it with my thumb. Probably not a big deal though. I love how the camera is like in the worst position. There we go. It's not the worst position, but the camera was in a slightly off position. So, I mean, I think it's mostly fine. Like the area I just touched, I'm going to sand it down anyway. Now, unfortunately, the fact that I'm applying this material on so late means that I may not get an opportunity to add primer to it tonight like I wanted to. But I figured while I'm at it, I'm going to look for every part of this ship that could benefit from putty. Really, I just did a light roughing up. I found some jagged edges here that didn't need a lot of work, but just kind of like a gentle, scuffing. Especially I'm over my keyboard, so I don't want to purposely do too much cleaning anyway, right? Okay, gotta be careful with that. Yeah, that putty is giving off some fumes. Getting high AF. Oh yeah, that's an interesting spot I would have noticed until later. Not a big deal, but it's just nice to remove that. We also have some stringing over here. So that doesn't need like too much attention, but and luckily once we prime it, I think most of that will be covered over anyway, but if I can do anything to get it minimized, I want to do what I can to minimize any stringing, anything like obvious like that. Yeah, that's better. And then we got one more piece here sticking out. So we don't want to overdo it, right? Even though there's areas where you see like room for improvement, I think you also have to like, you know when to be done or when not to overdo it, you know? Guys, look, I'm going to be printing out more of these ships. My goal will be to, fire off more of them. And I think the main thing is to be aware of when it comes to 3D printer ownership is the fact that you may have to do some finishing work, that it may be a long road between upgrading your printer and, testing the upgrades, calibrating things, adjusting things. And that, of course, it takes many hours to print. Like the print I was looking at on my screen a minute ago, right? What was that? Like 1 day, 6 hours, 51 minutes to do that half of a starship. Now, it's actually more than half of the starship because we're holding the model here and you can see the front and the back that's on screen right now. It's considerably larger than the front. So, yeah, we do have that, So this part will be a quicker print. In fact, I already have one. If I want to use this one, it's already off the assembly line. And I think the antennas came out looking a little nicer on this one. Now, once again, we're going to be putting brass rods into it. So even though in 3D printing, we want to maybe have that holy grail where everything can get done on one machine, usually you're going to do if you do a little effort after the fact, things will come out looking nicer. Now, another thing was with this particular model, the printer is capable of doing tiny holes, but this model, for some reason, the guy who designed it, he did a great job on most of it, but these gun ports look a little bit off. But what I did was I roughed up the grain, so to speak. It's not really wood grain, but I roughed it up a little bit to sort of smooth it out. And I did the same with the center very carefully because I didn't want to ruin anything, so I didn't get too aggressive on here. Like, I could probably do a little better, but the problem is this piece of paper or strip sanding twig doesn't fit quite in there, so I have to like be very cognizant about not sanding the wrong part. It's coming out better already. But yeah, so you got to do a little post-processing. It helps if you're willing to paint it. You could really get a nicer aesthetic, a nicer look, a nicer completed item, toy, ship, whatever it is. Resin printers are better, in my opinion, for small things, action figures, for example, Whereas you could print small starships, but if you want to print a larger starship, an FDM printer will allow you to print inherently larger parts. In fact, I began printing individual pieces for a Omega class destroyer from Babylon 5, and that's going to take like over 2 weeks if I'm continuously printing. So I figure it's going to take like a month to do it if I focus on that model. Right now I actually stopped printing parts of it because I'm thinking of doing some parts in a different material. So on a 3D printer you have a material called PLA, which is what we used here. But there's another material unlike PLA, in fact, let me just show you what PLA looks like when it's messed up to give you like a good idea. Here's like a similar, you know, foul up, right? This is actually using an extra thin nozzle. Normally I use a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. In this one I used a 0.2 millimeter nozzle, and you'll generally get weaker parts on the narrower nozzle. Granted, this is a smaller ship than what we already had. That might be part of the reason we had trouble with it. But essentially you can see like it fails. It's got this very fine stringiness. Interestingly, the wider your nozzle, the more strength you'll get, but the less detail. Whereas if you have a narrow nozzle, if you get it working right, you should be able to get more detail. Although this one, we can see we have an interesting wavy pattern here. And I think it only happens on one side. No, this one happens on all four sides. But on a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, you know, it gave me less of a hard time, and the detail is not too bad. But if I went to a 0.8 millimeter nozzle, I think I would start seeing a loss of, you know, a significant loss of detail. I don't even want to use the 0.6 millimeter nozzle, although that comes to be necessary when working with certain material. But, you know, we get primer on here. I don't think you'll be able to see the lines. I'm surprised. The lines are pretty hard to see here. Now, this is one of the finer models. Now, also it should be noted that usually you're going to see lines when you're doing angles, like this part here or this curvature here. I don't know if the person who designed it did a really good job or what. Like, sure, there were some issues that were more material related. In fact, that might be a good area to put some what do you call it, putty down. So we're going to go and I want to get like a mixing cup ready. So anyway, I think what's going to happen is we're going to squeeze out some of this material and it's going to come out like shit. I'm going to squeeze out more of it and it's going to come out looking nice. There we go. Whoa, the camera's off. I'm sorry. Let me just put the cap back on first. I don't want this material getting ruined. It's good stuff. And we're going to go back to the ship now. So we saw this curvature here. It didn't look terribly bad or anything like that, but I feel like I can do something with that. So we have a little bit of material on the tip of this piece here. Oh, that's starting to dry off pretty quick, huh? And, you know, we're going to end up sanding a lot of it off, but I think it'll fill in those little cracks that we had over there. And this isn't even necessary. Like, you know, like that bump was mostly smooth. Like that back bump is not getting any putty put on it, you know? We're only doing it on this front one to build it up a little bit. To fill in some fine gaps, and basically it's almost like just to help with smoothing. But we're going to be sanding off like 80% of the material I'm putting on right now is going to be removed by the time we're done here. Whew. I touched the side again. Whatever, we're going to be sanding it anyway, but we keep messing that up. But I think that's about it. I think we're basically done with this for now, right? So our next step is going to be adding the whatchamacallit to it. Oh, and I should probably clean up these darned antennas. There we go. So, you know, we just remove some of the material here because we're going to replace these with antennas anyway. We'll leave some here behind just so we have some reference material, but when everything is said and done, I'm probably going to have some gaps in the primer, but I guess I could prime it twice. You know what? That's what I'll do. I'll prime it once. I'll add the metal rods to it, and I'll prime it one more time, and then I'll paint it shortly thereafter. But, you know, these pieces here failed, and that's okay because we're going to replace them anyway with something made of metal. The ones on this side came out surprisingly decent. Like, I might leave them, but I'll probably end up ripping them off when everything's said and done. This one's especially stubborn here. There we go, we got it off. Oh good, we got that off too. And so I'm on the fence about leaving all of this. There we go, I just took off that white stuff. But I think we're going to probably leave it there. Worst case, I'm probably going to remove it with a hot knife. Oh, and look at that, we got some fuzziness here, you see that? Yeah, definitely got some of those weird wavy patterns on one side here. It's not enough to make me really worry about it, but like, that's part of the reason why I did some sanding on the side, so that the primer would maybe stick better, although I'm more comfortable with sanding it over here. But all things considered, yeah, I think it's about right. We just gotta wait before we can sand the putty. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this on top of my computer before I watch any anime and before I go and get ready for bed. And by the time I come back, I'm gonna see right before bed if it's dry enough to prime it or to do light sanding. I'll do it, but if this putty doesn't, you know, become firm by the time I'm ready to paint it, then we'll have to, you know, deal with it accordingly. But yeah, once again, I would reiterate, the main reasons I would not recommend a 3D printer, or at least I would recommend you learn about how to level a 3D printer. Leveling on an FDM printer is important. If dealing with a resin printer, I recommend you research the toxic fumes that you'll be dealing with or not dealing with. You know, at least be aware of what you're doing. And with a FDM printer where you're using standard PLA filament, your advantages are that you can print something larger, probably for a lower cost, on a lower cost machine, but that you have to worry about leveling the bed. There does exist an automatic leveling sensor, but you're going to have that issue where you still got to have the baseline leveling, and automatic leveling will only compensate for errors, but it's not going to fix a completely messed up leveling adjustment. You have to keep the filament in good condition. Keep it away from humidity. Be ready to buy a filament dryer or put it in the oven. If the filament gets exposed to humidity, it will be prone to not working right. But yeah, most models, you're gonna only get one color out of it unless you have like the ability to do multiple colors of filament. And even then, with multiple colors at your disposal, you'll probably benefit from an automatic leveling, from having the ability to paint it. Because there's two ways to do multiple colors. You can have a printer that has like multiple nozzles on one, end. But if you have multiple actual nozzles, you got to get your leveling dead on nuts. If you have 3 separate nozzles next to each other, you'll get 3 different colors. But you'll run into the problem that, one nozzle will be slightly closer than the other. Now you can get a special nozzle with, more advanced modification. You can get, a hot end that lets you put 3 different filaments into one nozzle, into a single nozzle. And the way that works is, aside from mixing colors, what you would be doing is primarily, just being able to switch different colors. Now, because the nozzle is always going to get primed with one color at a time, you have to have like a purge block, we call it, where it prints a block. And every time, let's say you're switching from red to blue, you're going to have it print the color red in a vertical tower in the corner. And then when it runs out of the blue, or when it purges the block, essentially it's going to, you got to switch from red to blue. And then it has to push out the red before the blue starts coming out of the nozzle. So that's a consideration in that situation, meaning you go through a little more material in order to have that ability to switch between colors. From my research, while the Creality End of 3 can be gotten for like under $300, I've probably put some money into modifying it. But even at the under $300, what would be an alternative? Well, I saw a brand, I forgot the name of it, like Ubi 3D. I can't remember the name. I want to say it was like Ubi 3D, but it's a different name. And they have a machine, it's like $1,500. It comes with like, I think 4 colors built into it. And it can do like a 9-hour print in 2 hours, which I don't know if that's lies in marketing or true. But if that's true, that would be kind of revolutionary. So, if I was running a business off 3D printing, I'd probably buy that slightly more expensive printer. Because you might as well do it right the first time, Why frustrate yourself on, the ender? One thing I was curious about is, can you spend more money on a 3D printer up front to get like convenience? And up to a point, the answer is no, but I think at some point you could. Assuming that this new printer model doesn't give you leveling issues, it might be a fine printer. But an alternative was, what was the other one that was supposed to be easy? Like the Prusa model or whatever. Those printers still need a lot of tender loving care. There's no like going from $300 to like $1,000 up front and getting a printer that doesn't require any TLC. They still all demand some TLC. And so, might as well get the $300 one and put more effort into it. But if like spending another $500 on top of the $500 gets you a printer that truly does hit that holy grail, then I think it's worth consideration. Because, one thing that resin can't do at all, it can do finer detail, but it can't do color. But if you can do color on well, at least it can't do multiple colors that I'm aware of. But on FDM printer, if you get a good quality FDM printer that honestly works, then we might have something there. But then again, it might have been marketing hype when I was told that machine could run on so many different colors. Maybe that was lying. But that $1,500 printer came with a tent and enclosure built around it, and a place to store the extra filament. And I suspect it had a built-in filament drying system in there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't. But it looked as if it might, which would be, also in favor of that hardware. But with that being said, I think we're going to end this live stream. Maybe I'll do a gaming stream tonight or tomorrow. Probably not tonight, but we'll play it by ear. But thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please leave a comment. Please like and subscribe on whatever network you're watching this on right now. And for now, we shall end